if you look at our economy, provision of reasonably priced food that, even though it's may not always be nutritious, is got a lot of calories in it and can keep us going that way, is one of the things that allowed the United States to double and triple and quadruple in population, especially over the period between the late 1800s and around World War II. And that is the main period of Chicago's growth, and that was sort of its number one industry.
Chicago has amazing food, but when I think about where that amazing food is, it's often like not on 95th and Cottage, or not. It is like there are a lot of amazing, like Chicago Chicken Waffles. There's some really good Harold's, but I think about the concentration of where that is. And if you look to the downtown, or like to the north side or the near west side, like there's so much more of it. And so how do we make a way to bring these food spaces, and also really good food spaces, like south? And that has to do with like investment and investing in Black businesses and Black restaurants, and yeah.
People moved to Chicago, especially immigrants and African American migrants, to support themselves, to make money, to make a better life. And immigrants both founded restaurants in order to be sort of community kind of clubhouses almost. This is where people from within that community could go. So they were kind of one of the cornerstones of ethnic communities.
There's this idea of separation and segregation, and then in those spaces, just like the lack of resources and that cutoff from the general resources that exist for other places creates these environments that are incredibly, extremely different from those that exist in other spaces. So if you look at the South Side compared to the North Side, they're very different. I mean, demographically, with race, with income, with the access of food and food spaces, they're very different. And so when you look at food apartheid, it calls into recognition the system that has played a role in creating these spaces.
So what a food desert is an area of relatively low food access, so generally defined as an area that doesn't have full surface grocery stores.
Yeah, I think you can look at, there's recently a Mariano's that opened in Bronzeville, I think off 39th Street, and there's like this idea of grocery stores being the solution to food. I like to call it food apartheid, but food deserts. Deserts are naturally occurring, food deserts are not. It's a structure that creates these environments and spaces, but I think when you look at why food environments exist, it's sort of a byproduct of a couple of things. And one of them is racism and racist policy in cities like Chicago. When you think of why environments in the city, on the west side and on the south side, are like predominantly Black, and to look at the amount of resources that have been disinvested from these spaces, and that also manifests itself through like food deserts.
The real roots are probably of the sort of severe food access issues probably in the 50s, when suburbanization was happening, white flight away from a lot of neighborhoods within the city, and the chain stores like Dominick's, Jewel kind of suburbanized as well. They opened most of their new stores in the suburbs, while closing many of their stores in the city.
We're living in a system that was built on like white supremacist ideologies, that like white people are inherently better than Black people. And so you have to also wrestle with that, like white communities don't look like this, and why don't they look like this? And why do Black communities have the schools that they have the violence? Like you have to kind of go deeper. And so I feel like those solutions like grocery stores don't actually get at the crux or the root reason why grocery stores abandoned our communities in the first place when they existed. And I could talk about capitalism, but I know capitalism is very scary, but I also think that's one of the reasons why you see food environments and the violence and the racism.
The main causes of hunger in Chicago, but also in the United States, are poverty and access to food. the biggest barriers between people having the food that they need to be healthy and thrive are insufficient income or the neighborhood they're in doesn't have sufficient access to food. The mission of the Greater Chicago Food Depository is providing food for hungry people while striving to end hunger in our community. What that means is that we're working every day to distribute food to anyone in need across Chicago and Cook County, while also offering programs and services that address the root causes of hunger.
Yeah, so there's an Urban Farm Sweetwater Foundation off 57th and Perry. That's a really, I think, amazing urban farm model. It's like the size of a city block. I'm growing a bunch of different food. Watermelon, squash, kale, collard green, like everything. But an urban farm is basically a farm in the city that grows produce, can grow flowers, but yeah.
We know charity alone is not going to solve hunger in the United States. We need our elected officials in Washington, D.C. and Springfield to make decisions and set strong policies and laws that are going to lift people out of poverty and give them the resources they need to be healthy and thrive.